we'll get to in a second because
I
I think everybody is on the same page with MODOK.
Hey guys, Isabel here. Welcome back to Reeled In. So today is another Dyad discussion. It's actually been quite some time since we've done one of these, but here with me is my friend Connor. And today we will be talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Obviously, spoilers if you haven't seen it, because we'll be talking about, pretty much the entire movie down the post credits. So you have been warned.
But this is the opening movie for Marvel's Phase 5. I think a lot of people, including myself, kind of jokingly call it Marvel's sci-fi debut.
It was a movie, to kick off this new phase. Like, I was really excited, I think, for this movie that, Marvel is coming out with like project after project after project. And if I'm being totally honest, like some of them I just look at them, I'm like, all right, cool. But there are others like this one that like I was actually very excited to see it. And I was excited to see certain people make their first appearances. It The more I sit with it, I don't think people need to be as rough and mean and harsh as they are.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are some other conversations that I think are warranted, because this movie is, 2.5 hours. It tries to tackle a really big thing. It tries to kick off the whole quantum realm, multiversal wars, and the Kang Dynasty, all in one movie, while also still being an anime movie. So I mean, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, this is a movie, as you know, I always try to go in without any expectations, because then I'm never disappointed when I walk out of the theater. But I definitely think this movie is getting not too many negative reviews, but just like
It's getting mixed reviews.
it's just like people sort of complaining about the wrong thing, I think.
Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So, like, I know everybody likes to use their argument to whatever like the Rotten Tomatoes review score is. First of all, the audience score is incredibly high,
Yeah.
compared to the critic score. So critics and people who watch movies critically, that's me, look at it in a very different way. So by no means is this movie not enjoyable at all. It's actually a lot of fun in a lot of places. I also think people don't know how the tomato meter exactly works. Um,
The
so
tomato
that's
meter.
just, that's just basically a majority of the critics not giving it, a passing grade, or it's getting a not a great grade. But like it's still a movie. It's definitely not the worst movie that Marvel's ever produced. I did enjoy a lot of it.
What I think some people, like why some people might dislike this movie, Marvel trailers, I think nowadays are quite misleading in how they manipulate the tone of it. That happened, I
Yeah.
think, with Multiverse of Madness, to me personally, and then again, I think with other people with this movie. I think the trailer made this movie seem quite more serious than I think Ant-Man movies usually are. And it's kind of like every Marvel movie now is expected to be this humongous, epic masterpiece. And I'm like, sometimes, like, you have to stick with the main character, what their tone, what their vibe is. But that being said, because it did try and tackle these serious moments, I think it did well, because the entire movie wasn't serious, but those moments that needed to be, I think they did pretty good on. Mostly Jonathan Majors was a big part in that because he's amazing.
Yeah, you stole my line.
I mean, you can
So
keep saying it.
so kind of like our multiverse of madness conversation. I have a feeling I am going to hog it. Like I talked about Wanda. I think this was gonna be Jonathan Majors and Kang. I think this is one of the reasons why I was so excited for this movie, because we get just crumbs of Kang, of Jonathan Majors as Kang in the end of Loki with He Who Remains, and it really kind of alludes to the multiversal war and the Kang dynasty.
Mhm.
But I think the fact that they're so different, like I've been telling people this for the longest time, and like by no means have I been like a Jonathan Majors like fan since day one. He has such range, and like everything that he does, down to like the most minute like bodily movements. They're so intentional and they're so controlled, and he has so much range as an actor, and he has so much charisma. So I think casting him as Kang, somebody who's a Nexus being who is every when and everywhere,
Mhm.
you know, casting an actor like that was arguably one of the best decisions that Marvel could have made. But he's the best part, I think, of this movie.
Mhm.
um, and I know a lot of people have been saying that, but it's true.
Yeah, I know. I knew going into this movie that with Jonathan Majors, portraying Kang, that he was going to do something unexpected. He was going to do something kind of out of the box. But even me going in knowing that he was going to do something I wasn't expecting, he's still passed. Like he's exceeded what I actually thought he was going to do. I don't know if you caught this or not throughout the movie, but he gave Kang this very like sad, like this deep sadness within the character. And even in that scene towards the climax where for a moment Kang thinks like, his entire city is destroyed basically. He's crying. Like there are tears streaming down his face. And it just makes me want to know a lot more about the Conqueror, because we got a little bit of backstory with how he got to the quantum realm, but not actually with his character, which I was a little bit disappointed. I did want a bit more of that. But it just makes me intrigued, like what happened exactly with Kang. Like we know why he was banished, but I feel like there's a deeper reasoning as to why he was. And I kind of wanted that to be explored a bit more, but I don't think we've actually gotten the last of the Conquerors, and hopefully that will be explored in the future of the MCU.
Because I know we're gonna get a lot of Kang.
A lot
You
of
know,
Kang.
by the post credit scene, especially, the fact that we're getting King Dynasty as a film, and then that post credit scene where they're all like, "Wait, how do I get there?" In terms of the dynamic of this version of Kang specifically, or I guess just Kang in general, is something that I think Jonathan Majors understands, is that he has been everywhere and every when and speaks every language, and it's similar to the Thanos dynamic of you're not the only one cursed with knowledge.
Mhm.
So knowledge can be powerful, it can be a blessing, but it can also
It can be a curse too.
it can be a curse. Yeah, it can be kind of a decaying factor of your psyche. So I
Mhm.
think the fact that he knows so much and he's done so much, like he's conquered whole worlds, so he's also incredibly powerful. But like there's a lot to him, and this is, I think, just the beginning.
He is very powerful. And I do kind of wonder if all the other kings have the same, or hopefully like a similar power. Because when he was like, those that blue energy just like blasting from his hands, I was like, I can maybe count on like 3 fingers who I think could stand a chance against Kang, especially because in phase 4, at least to me personally, a lot of our like new heroes, they don't really have like this humongous all powerful power to them, I guess.
Yeah. Well, most of them, they're not actual superheroes. They're just
Yeah.
superheroes. I'm struggling to think of who else is actually like a super powered person. What I'm saying is those are the super powered people. Everybody else is kind of just a guy in a suit. And
Yeah.
even Kang, even this version of Kang is kind of just a guy in a suit who's cursed with knowledge.
Well, until he whips out those laser hands of his.
Oh yeah, but that's part of his suit. That was the whole reason he had to get his neuro chair
Oh.
back up in the suit. So he is just,
Oh.
not to dismiss the amount of power that he is
I
capable of.
actually did not catch that. I actually
Yeah.
didn't catch that. Huh.
Yeah, so not to diminish him at any way. It's the fact that he is able to wield that much power with just a suit.
Yeah, that'll be actually interesting now. Like strategy wise, because they got to get whatever Kang, whatever like magic weapon suit he has on. They're gonna have to like defect that in some way in the future. So that'll be interesting. But speaking of characters, because there were actually a good number of them in this movie, I feel like we've been so obsessed with Kang that we just kept talking about him. But it is an Ant-Man movie. So I feel like maybe we should discuss the character of Scott Lang. So I think a good theme for him and Cassie, as well as like just generally the whole movie, is that one line he has in his book, which I will be getting when it comes out in like April or whenever it comes out. September. Look out for the little guy. But what I think is interesting is Scott, that's not Scott's main priority in the beginning first half of this movie, but it is Cassie's. And I really like Cassie. I feel like that character gets too much hate because she had really good moments for me, which made me really excited to see more of her in the MCU. But at the moment, Scott, he starts off kind of a little bit egotistical, not enough for me to like dislike him. You know, he's kind of like that.
Not Tony Stark levels of ego.
Yeah, not Tony Stark level. But I thought that was interesting. And I think something that could have been improved upon is a main like personal conflict for Scott Lang was supposed to be him trying to reconnect with his daughter because he missed so many years because of the blip. But I didn't really get like a disconnect between the two of them. I didn't get a struggle between those two characters. For the most part, it seemed like a regular like father-daughter relationship with, you know, with Ant-Man suits.
Yeah, I think, well, it like started off kind of strong with a lot of that. Like, that's my one complaint is that, but socially, politically, emotionally, it could have done a lot more because it gives us crumbs at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I remember we were watching and you have your little notebook, and I remember I took your notebook and I wrote daddy issues on the side. And I don't remember what the line was exactly, but it was when he was driving her home from prison or from jail. She said something. It was like a direct jab at him, using her as like a point of comparison. But also like the fact that, you know, she is kind of representative of, I think, what we see in a lot of our generation and even the younger generations, where like they want to fight, they want to do something positive, they want to do the right thing. And you know, it sort of returns to that at the end with the rebellion a little bit. They're in places where they're not really appropriate and they're not really able to be appreciated. So when you have that final rebellion, that's why it just feels a little odd. Because it's also very it's a very Rise of Skywalker moment where like somebody gives a speech and then everybody shows up all at once.
I did make that comparison when I was watching it. And I do think this movie, you know, in correspondence to all that, like a longer opening sequence focused a little bit more on everyone's lives. I, for one, am a sucker for like montages, and I think that is a staple of Ant-Man movies, is to have some sort of montage. So not saying to get rid of the montage, but maybe add a couple extra minutes on like everyone's lives. And because there's supposed to be tension between the characters at the beginning of the movie. And like you said, there are crumbs, but in terms of any significant feelings from that'll make us like or hate characters later on, I didn't really get that. An example would be between Hope and Janet. I feel like there should have been some really big tension, and we kind of just get like one scene exploring it. And I feel like we should have had like a little bit more emotion, I think, actually on Hope's.
Hope was barely in this at all. She kind of just served as a Deus Ex Machina, which is a little upsetting.
Like she was in it, but she was kind of like a shell. It felt like she was like a shell of a character. Like they didn't focus on her throughout the movie or her feelings, I feel like.
Yeah, and like a billion different speculations, but I think bottom line, it just comes to the writing and the editing. Because the editing in this movie is wild.
At least the first half of the movie, when they're going back and forth.
The first act is bananas. And I think that is also one of the things that just makes this movie feel weird for some people. Because editing is everything. Because if you have all these weird, hard, choppy cuts, it gives you whiplash. Not even in the sense that it's supposed to be a friendly reminder that what you're watching is fake. It just feels uncomfortable.
It was really weird. Like we get like 2-second scenes of Scott and Cassie, and then like a minute scene with the other three, and then and it was just kind of weird.
Yeah.
Usually I'm someone who doesn't notice things like that because I feel like
I mean,
you're
I've
more
been
film oriented than
conditioned.
I
I'm
am.
literally conditioned to be hyper aware of these. But yeah,
Yeah.
like
But
some of
even I noticed. I was like, oh wow.
yeah, they were like 2 minute cuts because like the one of the purposes of having a cut is to create tension or to give the audience a sense of dramatic irony.
Mhm.
But like it would make a hard cut after like in the middle of a conversation
Yeah.
and then it would pick up immediately where it left off and it's like you can do that, like that's not a rule or whatever, but a lot of times there is supposed to be a little bit of something if your goal is to create tension. Yeah, I feel we didn't get enough time with Hope at all. It's like she's more than just being smart and being well spoken. So the fact that she can be like a badass, but she can also have emotional moments. Like we got a lot of those in the first Ant-Man. We got a little bit in the second one. This one we didn't get any of it. This is what I want to see. This
Yeah.
is what I want to see.
I want to see
Like
some interesting character dynamics, not just
yes.
floating jellyfish in the air for like half a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think the Ant-Man movies do a really good job, or have up until this point, I think done a really fantastic job at like family dynamic.
I think they're focusing so much on Cassie and Scott that the dynamic between, like Hank, Janet, and Hope just kind of
Got sidelined.
yeah. Cause like I did like, I thought the relationship between Scott and Cassie was really sweet and also refreshing because most MCU family dynamics are quite strenuous. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Can you spell daddy issues?
yeah. So
So the fact that they
um
reconcile at some point.
yeah. So like
The
I did
big
like seeing it.
Cassie, the big Cassie and Big Scott, like for a while it pulled me out of it a little bit because I forget that they like talk really slowly and they move really slowly. I'm like, what's going on? But then they give the big hug. They're like, oh, it feels like I'm hugging a marsh. I'm like, it's a little goofy, but like, I'll take it.
But like Ant-Man is goofy. So like
Yeah.
that's like I wasn't too concerned with that.
Yeah. Like that was the goof that I'm used to.
Yeah. I feel like people forget Marvel, like phase one was kind of goofy.
I can't stand Phase One because it's so unbelievably uncampily goofy.
Yeah. People are like, this isn't Marvel. I'm like, actually, I think you need to rewatch a couple
Yeah.
movies because it is.
Yeah. Have you seen the first Avengers?
Yeah. But that being said, continuing with these character conversations, that actually was a little bit of one of the moments that I'm about to reference. I feel like they did infantilize Cassie a little bit with certain dialogue, the way it was said, the way some of the lines were written.
Yeah.
Another one was during when Cassie's giving the speech, which good for her, proud of her. But she was like, my dad taught me that. I'm like, that sounds like you sound like a 12-year-old. And this is no hate to like Catherine Newton or Cassie. It's just something that I kind of saw and thought was like a little weird. It's like that could have been that line could have been done better, either written better or delivered better. I was like kind of like, all right.
Because how old is she, right? She's like 17 at least.
I'm just gonna assume between the ages of 16 and 18.
Yeah. So like not quite an adult, but
Not that young
not
either.
14. Yeah. Well, the other thing too is like it's not like she didn't grow up, completely like internalized. So sometimes like some people do, grow up to sound like that for a variety of reasons. One of them being like they're just like shielded by society and internalized by like their home. But she was without her parents, or at least a parent, for 5 years.
Yeah, she grew up
She
during the
grew
blip.
up
Like
she grew up raising herself. So I did expect her to be a little bit more like gritty, a little bit more like
mature a little bit, yeah.
yeah, a little more on her toes a little bit.
Mhm.
Because I can tell you if I had to do that, like I yeah, I wouldn't be pulling my punches all the time. There are just a couple things, yeah, that are a little too goofy. And the whole like, what am I? With MODOK, which we'll
I
get to in a second. Because
I
I think everybody is on the same page with MODOK. But the whole, what am I? I don't know. Just don't be a dick.
I saw that and I was like,
Okay.
that should not have been in the movie.
It was weird. It was kind of goofy. It's just, and it's the way that she said it.
It's
Again,
not even
it's the way it was delivered, because you can still, bottom line, it's the same thing, but just saying, I don't know, just don't be a dick, and then go don't, and walks and runs off,
That wasn't even my issue with that whole scene. My issue was that that's going to be MODOK's turning point from being, bad to good, is a 16-year-old telling him not to be a dick. Like,
It is 16-year-old that he tried to murder.
Still.
So I understand where it's coming from, but again, it's the way that both of those lines were delivered.
It just kind of felt like an easy out for character for me. And
Yeah.
even in terms of Kang's like initial defeat, where Darren's just like flying in and he kind of destroys Kang's like shield, that also felt like an easy out in terms of like writing and storytelling standpoint. Like I feel like the ants, who were amazing and had very significant roles, which made me very happy. I feel like
love that. I
they should have
actually
been the
really
ones.
liked that.
Me too. They should have been the ones to also like penetrate King's shield in a way. I just felt like that whole sequence, I was like, what am I watching? What is this?
MODOK kind of ruined it for me. And
I
here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's almost impossible to not make him look goofy. Like he looked goofy in the comics. He looked
yeah.
goofy as a toy. They completely changed the look.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know, especially recently, they've made like a conscious effort try to adapt it the best way that they can from the comics, because everybody
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, it doesn't look the way it does in the comics. So, okay, here you go. And
Yeah.
you get the Kang costume, it looks amazing. But then you get things like MODOK.
To be fair though, the MODOK with like the metal face shield up, like the design was pretty decent. I was expecting a lot worse in terms of like that. It was just when Darren's face was just I don't know. I have read, this is like not through my own knowledge, but I have read some other people's opinions on it, and I guess people who have experience with like CGI and visual effects and things like that. And it was
That would be hard.
they sound like easy fixes. It was mostly just kind of like elongating his mouth or his face kind of fit like the sides instead of just copying and pasting the actor's like face into a green screen or whatever. And I was like, well, personally, I understand if you want to have MODOK in the movie, it makes sense to have, Darren, who did get sucked into the quantum realm, be MODOK. But like, Darren was not an antagonist or a villain that I wanted to see again. He was not memorable for me from the first Ant-Man movie.
Menacing at all.
Not really.
At any point.
Only when he got into the suit, he was kind of dangerous, but dangerous.
A machine only designed for killing, and how many? What's his death count?
Like 2, maybe like some like off-screen guard or something. 2, maybe.
Yeah, because even in that big rebellion at the end, by that point, he's going up against Cassie, and then he makes this sudden turn to into an Avenger. I don't know.
Yeah, I honestly, why was he in the movie? Like
I think the fact that they were trying to tackle so many different things. Like it I think bottom line is this movie tried to do too much. And because it tried to do too much with too many things, it didn't get to do enough with
the ones that mattered.
And it didn't do enough with what it already had to work on. But that's just my opinion. And I trust me, I get how difficult it could be as just a writer, period. And then having to be a writer for something like Marvel, it's got to be kind of tough.
Yeah. I mean, my issue isn't necessarily with like the actual writers, because I know like you might have an original script, but then, the executive producers, the directors, whoever, like they make changes on the spot daily. So whatever you start with originally, by the time it's done and produced and given to the audience, it can be something quite different as well. Yeah. So I think
like apparently that ending was shot like months before the release.
Yeah.
Like that was a late reshoot. And it's rumored, there's no confirmation, but it's rumored that the original ending, or one of the original endings, was Scott and Hope getting stuck in the quantum realm, or Kang getting out into the universe and starting out the multiversal war. Instead, we kind of got like the existential reflection.
Yeah, that felt a little off to me. First of all, I'm glad that Hope and Scott didn't end up stuck in the quantum realm, because you already had Scott being stuck in the quantum realm.
Well, yeah, that's both of them.
Yeah, well, that's just kind of repeating yourself anyway, like just having someone be stuck in the quantum realm. But that, yeah, the existential crisis, I was like, okay. I think the resolution could have also been a little bit longer because the movie, like, it climaxed and then it ended pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's exactly what they did with Wakanda Forever, which is still one thing that really throws me off that movie.
Mhm.
Because otherwise it would have been almost perfect
Pretty much, yeah.
in my eyes. It would have been almost perfect.
Mhm.
But you have this sudden ending. But yeah, we're not exactly sure what happened to Kang because I don't think he's gone. I think maybe he just got reduced further into the quantum realm, possibly.
Well, if you think about it, earlier in the movie during Janet's, I guess, backstory, he explained that like it was a multiversal course. You could travel any timeline, any universe, whatever. So I think he might just be
Somewhere.
somewhere. He might just be
Could
somewhere.
could that be that Kang in the post cred as Victor Timely? So not necessarily a variance, but a cover up, a mask. That would be interesting.
That would be
I
interesting.
would like that very much, to be honest, because I don't think we got enough of the Conqueror. The fact he got taken out by ants.
Yeah, I was kind
No.
of like, isn't
I
this
I
version
love
supposed to be the like the worst
the big
version?
bad. He's
Yeah.
supposed to be the big bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he just kind of goes that way. Okay.
Yeah. So like two different sides to this though. One sidebar, I do love that, with Hank and just his army of ants just holding his arms out like this with quantum ants everywhere. Like that was peak Ant-Man
Yeah, that was
cinema.
pretty cool. I'm not a big
Uh
fan of Hank, but I enjoyed that scene.
on the other hand, I do sort of accept it in the sense that I think where we get thrown off by like enemy defeats and whatnot is like the unorthodoxy of the way that these heroes function. The prime examples to me are Ant-Man and the Guardians of the Galaxy because
Mhm.
they're just so incredibly unorthodox in the way that they do pretty well everything.
Yeah.
It's what you least expect. You have somebody like Kang who has experienced everything up until this point.
Up until quantum
Killed
ants.
killed Thor, killed
Yeah.
a god, but isn't sure if he's ever come up against an Ant-Man before.
Mhm.
So it's not only new territory, but it's territory that can't even begin to expect because Scott can literally change like to 3 different sizes within seconds.
Big Ant Man. They fed me. I love gigantic Ant Man. Yeah, like literally my favorite moment in the second Ant Man movie is when he's in the water trying to get that guy, the lab from the ferry. Like that's literally my favorite part. And they did it so well. He's just like he's powerful, small, but he's powerful when he's
Big.
big. And I think that was, I mean, as much as I just love, just giant Ant-Man because he's just giant. I also think that those scenes did really well for, Scott Lang's character because it showed that he has what it takes to be a hero. Like he's
Yeah.
not just one of those goofy, like sideline characters. He can he can cause some damage,
Yeah.
especially when he's angry, because this is the angriest we've ever seen Scott Lang.
Yeah, I remember like sitting back on my seat like this, going, "Whoa!" I did not expect to ever see Scott that angry. I have
Yeah.
never expected Paul Rudd that angry. I feel like we got a lot, not just from the angry scene, but the way that he tried to deal with Cassie and tried to be a disciplinary father. Like I do feel like we also got a lot from Paul Rudd.
Mhm.
So I think as far as performances go, some of them are okay, but I think they stand out because you have Jonathan Majors, because you have Michelle Pfeiffer, and then you have this side of Paul Rudd that I don't think we get to see enough.
Speaking of Michelle Pfeiffer, I don't think Janet was really portrayed the way I think she should have been portrayed. But she did an amazing job of letting us, the audience, know that Janet is terrified of Kang. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but like for most of the movie when she talks about him, she's actually shaking. So that's one thing, you know, I will applaud Michelle Pfeiffer for that. But in terms of like Janet, you know, I used to like her as a character, but after this movie, I don't like her anymore. Specifically because she was like, we can like just leave Cassie there, essentially. I was like, you go back for Cassie, Janet. You go and help her.
Your granddaughter.
Your granddaughter.
I don't
But I
know.
also,
It's a
again, with
thought.
the whole exposition at the beginning of the movie, I wish we got more Janet and just how scared she is to talk about the quantum realm. Because then maybe I would have sympathized with her later on when she was like, we can go back for Cassie. Because when that happened, I was like, I have no empathy. I have no sympathy for you. Like, why are you your granddaughter? Go back and get her. So again, that's just one of the things I like wish they established a little bit more in the beginning.
And I think that they tried to do that by having the film open with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then there's, that dramatic cut.
Right.
I get that. And it's again, it sort of goes into just like general, like there were so many other things going on. And
Mm-hmm.
you only have so much time.
Right.
Like I don't really think there were moments where like it wasted a whole lot of time. Like some of the stuff with the quantum people, was a bit much. Like some of that could have been trimmed. But there weren't terrible like whole like 15 minutes waste of time.
I said it before and I'll say it again, but I will gladly sit through like a 3.5 hour movie if you establish characters correctly. You know, if you have this really long, you know, action climax sequence, which I think this movie did. Not that I minded, but like I'll sit through it if it's good and it's well established and you know all these connections are being made and plugged in where they need to be plugged in. I'll sit and I will happily watch it.
Yeah.
I know the same can't be said for everyone, but I will happily watch it.
It can be 3.5 hours. It just can't feel like 3.5 hours.
Let me know your thoughts on this. But I think
I think I know where you're going with this.
I
Because we're
think
Irish twins and I can hear your thoughts.
during the climax, the climax of the climax, someone should have perished. Specifically for the reason because one, I think this movie ended not only quickly but very lightly in turn because you built up this movie to be, you know, have all these serious moments. You have Kang established already as the big bad of phase, I think 5 and 6, essentially. So I think someone should have died by Kang's hand because Kang, who is the baddest of the bad of all the variants, he himself was nervous, scared, whatever, of the rest of him because he had seen the end and that something essentially worse than him was coming. So if you want us, the audience, to be nervous and scared of what's coming, there had to be a consequence in this movie of Kang.
I don't think people have to always die. I agree that you do have to have consequences. And I think, again, with that ending, the way it just kind of ends.
Yeah.
And they get out of there all hunky dory, and he just has a little bit of like existential thought. Like, welcome to having ADHD and bipolar disorder. That is kind of what it's like. Not dismissing that in any way, but like if I came up against like a conqueror, I think I would expect to have greater consequences than PTSD.
Existential dread.
Like that's why I wouldn't have minded if Scott and Hope got stuck, at least for like another couple of minutes and like figured it out because like Cassie just kind of magically turns the thing back on and they just go home.
In terms, and I think this might be like sort of like a directing issue maybe, but I think like Scott and Hope were way too calm about being stuck again in the quantum realm because I don't think they know that Cassie can just magically like press a couple buttons and reopen that portal thing.
She's smart, but she's not Shuri.
Yeah. It's like if you and I got stuck in the quantum realm, I would feel a little bit better that like I had, you know, my friend with me. But
I'd be freaking out.
Still be like, well, how do we get back home? Like, can we rig up something? Like what? Like I would be freaking out too. And the fact that they weren't, I was like
I think it's a little more comforting knowing that there is like life in the quantum realm as opposed to what Scott experienced for 5 years and just kind of like floating around in dead space.
Yeah.
But
still, I'm like,
I'd still be freaking out, especially if I had, a child.
Yeah, and like friends and family and stuff. And I was like, hello, like my life is up there, you know.
Another thing, where did time go? We kind of forgot about the dynamic of time in the quantum realm because he said he was there for like it felt like 5 minutes, but it had actually been 5 years. Right. So what if they've been down there for give or take an hour and a half, 2 hours. Where does that put us in?
I guess like a week passed because no one seemed very like there didn't just seem to be, a time loss essentially. So, but yeah, like I said, that with the whole resolution, if you just added a couple extra minutes with that resolution, you could have added that information in. You could have added a couple other information in.
The fact that it's there, it is now a continuity break.
What I would have liked to see, again, if we had a longer exposition, focused a little bit more on not necessarily the characters, but just their dynamics with each other. And then with the resolution, add in the information you need to add, but also show the difference, like how that has improved the relationships between the characters, especially between Janet and Hope. There's no arc essentially in terms of like most of the characters. Scott had a little bit, just a little bit. And of course, yeah, it's like stale character arcs, in my opinion. And again, I think that could have been improved with like a longer exposition and resolution. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, because Cassie didn't learn much. Scott learned from Cassie, though.
Mm-hmm. Although I did like the scene where he's kind of like, teaching her how to be like an Ant-Man or
on
Ant
site.
Woman. Yeah. He's like, good, like, I did like that scene.
Yeah. See, like those are the things that I wanted like a little bit more of.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen in the first two Ant-Mans that, he really does care. And even though he's, her infancy was like a big point of contest and guilt with him.
But it's also his motivation for like
yeah.
all the other things he's done in his life, which I did like. I like that was still like, still maintained in this movie, especially when with like him and his probable others. That scene actually gave me chills when they're like stacking on top of each other to get him closer to the core so he can shrink it. I liked that scene
Baskin
a lot.
Robbins guy.
Yeah. Also, it made me like kind of interested in like a little bit of a head tilt. If these are all the probabilities he could be, he always was Ant-Man. He would always be Ant-Man, except for like once with the Baskin Robbins guy. But I thought that was a little interesting. I feel like there maybe should have been a couple other probabilities that he could have chosen, in life. In the future, though, I hope we do see a bit more aggressive side of Ant-Man, gigantic Ant-Man. Just because I think like that was an enjoyment for me. I do want more of Cassie. I want her and Kate Bishop to be best friends. I feel like they would get along so well. That'd be kind of cool. But
I love how she has they all have the sneakers too.
Yeah, her Converse stayed on the whole time. I thought that was so cool. Of course, we now know why it's called King Dynasty, because there's literally so many. So many. And we got like there's like a plethora of Easter eggs in that mid-credit scene. They have the comic Kang, with the blue face and the actual outfit, and then they have Lizard Kang, which is interesting. Did not expect to see him.
Which was practical.
Yeah.
So they posted that was him sitting in the makeup chair for like hours.
And then we have Loki season 2 to be excited for, because
I'm now excited because Kang is there. I didn't care. I admit I didn't really care. I was excited to see Kwan, but now that I know Kang is gonna be there,
or at least one of his variants,
they keep giving me reasons to stay, and I'm like, I love you for it, but I also hate you for it.
I'm not necessarily like excited. Like I'm not like a Loki obsessive kind of person, but I'm quite intrigued as to what the Loki season 2 will give us. So yeah, but overall, I think this movie, it did what it set out to do, which would be introduce us to Kang and all those issues, and kind of be a family movie. I think it did pretty well with that. I'd give it like an 80, actually. An 8 out of 10, which might be higher than everyone else's, but
that's about the audience score. It's like 80 something.
I definitely think the critics hate on it just a little bit too much. But again, what do I know? I'm not a professional critic, like film critic. Yeah. So
yeah, that's also not their average rating. That's just the average of people who had negative reviews.
Yeah.
So the positive reviews, I haven't looked at them. They could be all like 8 out of 10.
True.
I'm not like you. I have high expectations for everything all the time.
Yeah. So, that sounds stressful to live your life like that, but
I don't know if you notice, my hairline's receding and I'm crow's feet. I do have higher expectations in general. I did expect this to be darker and grittier there are certain projects that have set like a precedence. So like Endgame and Infinity War and even things like Multiverse of Madness, like they set a precedence for tone.
Mhm.
So like it can be done. It's not always appropriate. I know that. I know that. And I don't want that. I like having things that are a little bit lighthearted, like Miss Marvel,
Mhm.
and most of the Guardians, most of the time, where like and most of the Ant-Man. But I just think with a character like Kang, I did expect there to be a little bit more grit.
Yeah, so overall, I think a pretty decent movie. I guess a fun way to open phase 5. Makes me personally excited for the future of the MCU. So yeah, that is all I personally have to say on the movie. Do you have anything
I'm
else to add?
excited. I'm excited for more Kang.
I know you are. But yeah, guys, that was our discussion on Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Leave a like on the video, comment, what did you think about the movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you think things could be improved? And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future Marvel discussion videos, as well as Marvel reviews, as well as Marvel reaction videos. But guys, thank you so much for watching. Connor, thank you for joining, and I'll see you guys next time.